The wall for Westbrook blockbuster. And I'm using blockbuster in the 1995 way, that it's big, high wattage everywhere. There are rows of Point Break. And in the 2020 way, and that this was the only spot left for these guys with this panel. Did you know there's one blockbuster left in the country?
Where is it?
I read that. Yeah, in Bend, Oregon, and it's an Airbnb now. So maybe they're like a blockbuster and we're still sleeping on these guys. Or maybe we're like a blockbuster and these guys can't flick nets. I don't know. We got that, and we have AD and LeBron signing. What do you want first? Ramona, AD and LeBron? This is for you, Ramona. There we go. Did anybody think they weren't going to sign with the Lakers? Who has ever left LA in free agency? Davis, 5 years max. LeBron, 2-year extension. What does locking them in mean for the franchise and for the rest of the league? Around the hordes of Ramona Shelburne.
Oh my gosh, I get to do the thing that you usually do to us and tell you, who left the Lakers in free agency? Dwight Howard.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Okay. I was meaning of a certain caliber. Kareem doesn't leave. Magic doesn't leave. James Worthy doesn't leave when he's at his peak. That's what I mean, but go ahead.
And I'll say this with the Lakers. When they traded for Anthony Davis, a lot of us were critical of that deal because we still remembered what happened with Dwight Howard when they gave away a lot and then he left them high and dry after 1 year. AD was in that same position. He could have done that, but because they gelled so well, he and LeBron have teamed up. The only thing that surprised me, Tony, frankly, is the length of these deals. Because, if you're Anthony Davis and you're 27 in your prime, you can do a two-year deal with an option on the third year. So you get the 10 years of service time, then you do another max deal. The fact that he did 5 years, that tells me that these guys want to lock in as much money as possible because of the uncertain future in the NBA. I mean, I think the global economy and the NBA economy, we don't know what next year's going to look like. We don't know what this year's going to look like. And I think at this stage in everyone's career, whether it's LeBron James or Anthony Davis, you lock in that guaranteed money.
Tim Kalishaw, what do these deals mean to you?
Well, Tony, Ramona throws a lot of reporting and knowledge and sourcing at you. I go a different direction on topics like this. The way I look at what happened yesterday with Anthony Davis and going back to what happened a couple months ago in Orlando is now LeBron has transformed the team into the Heat of 2012 when after they won that first title, after losing to the Mavs in 11, they win in 12. And then from then on until they broke up, the Heat against the field was an even bet. And I think because what we saw happen with the Clippers, and a lot of us fell all over ourselves about the Clippers, and that didn't go too well. And because I don't think the Nuggets and Mavericks are quite ready. I think Lakers against the field now, for this year, maybe beyond, when you have Davis locked up for 5 years and LeBron somehow showing no signs of aging, that's the way it's got to be. It's their league.
Sarah Spain?
Yeah, I agree. This is a team that already was better than you at the 1-2, and now they have those guys locked up for another couple of years. The concern was about the depth there. So in the offseason, they go add the sixth man of the year and the runner-up to the sixth man of the year, and they shore up all those spots that we had questions about. So those teams like the Clippers that we were confident in, Tim, like you, I had the Clippers last year as being a better team. But the Clippers, there's so many question marks about what they can recover and how they can recover. And meanwhile, the Lakers just become heads and tails above everybody else. And to your point, why would you want to leave? Why wouldn't they sign this deal? It worked.
Okay. When you hear 5 years for Anthony Davis, if I could start you there, Bob Ryan, instead of the shorter deal like Ramona was saying and then the max after that, what do you think?
I think he likes it there.
Yeah.
Simple as that. I think he likes playing with LeBron. Who wouldn't? And no, this is all so simple. They're all self-evident. The immediate ramification is that you now have the Lakers and you draw a line. No question. You draw a line, and then it's the pretenders start lining up in whatever order you want. They are the prohibitive favorites to win, barring the unforeseen injury. And with LeBron and his age, and if he were to get injured, then he might not recover too quickly. We found out a year ago when he was hurt the year before this one. So, but the fact is that they have solidified themselves as the team to beat, and as long as LeBron holds up healthy, the team to beat for the foreseeable future, and they make themselves a beautiful destination for all the good high-level role players, be they shooters, rebounders, defenders, orators, whatever they are that would like to play with the best one-two punch.
And the timing with LeBron's deal, one of those role players could be someone named Bronny in a few years if a couple rules change. Ramona, last word here.
Well, I'll tell you this. The one thing that surprised me was the length that LeBron and AD both signed for, because there was an option where both of them could have done deals that they could have become free agents again next summer.
Yeah.
Now, not because they want to leave, but because they would want to pair Anthony Davis with another young star so that LeBron, who's going to be 36 in a month, okay, who's going to be 36 this year, doesn't have to be the main guy for the length of that
Yeah, that's
contract.
possible, but I think
they
you
both
said it
opted
the
for
first time
security.
around. A lot of uncertainty in the world, and with this season specifically, that maybe now is the time to sign for, in LeBron's case, 2 years. All right, now Westbrook for Wall. And not just Wall. Washington also had to send a first-round pick to Houston to make this happen. How Washington moves on from the player they drafted number 1 10 years ago, and he was beloved in D.C., even while not playing the last 2 years, so it's going over hard in that way. And how Westbrook is now traded yearly, and how these contracts were actually moved. Bob Ryan, what does this trade accomplish, and where does its impact most lie, in your opinion?
Well, I think the impact will both be on the Washington fans, who will be surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, nightly entertained and sometimes exasperated by the mercurial Russell Westbrook, a different player than John Wall, number one. Look, this trade's all about, very simply this. Westbrook wanted out. They had to find a salary match. Oh, and there was sitting a $30 million guy, of course, by proving that $30 million doesn't buy what it used to. And there, so it was John Wall. Could have been anybody. It was John Wall. That's what
I think you shorted him about $10 million. These are $40 million guys now for the next 3 seasons. Sarah Spain, floor is yours.
I mean, this helps the Wizards. The Wizards get better because Westbrook is a better player and he's more consistently good. And it doesn't really change to me that Harden wants out with the Rockets. He wanted Westbrook gone, so he got that. But there was no one you were going to bring in that was going to be a better player than Westbrook, so you were going to get worse by getting rid of the guy you didn't want to play with anymore. And they have. Even if Wall is what he used to be, it won't be as good as Westbrook, and there's no guarantees he's as
So
good
you
as
don't
he
think – I was watching this morning, Woj was on TV talking about how Harden preferred Wall to Westbrook, and I thought maybe that was him tipping his hand that he would stay in Houston. You don't believe that?
I don't think it's going to make them great, and he wants to compete for a title. This isn't going to be a team that can compete for a title, so I think he's still going to want out. This is an interesting trade, though, because it is 2 guys who become sort of albatrosses for their team by being great, by being able to get that max deal. Now Wall suddenly becomes, partly because of injuries, a guy where you don't know where to put him, and same with Westbrook. So they trade for each other. It's odd that Westbrook's an MVP guy who gets traded the next 2 seasons in a row.
Yeah.
There's this crazy stat. So only 78 players in the NBA in the last 5 seasons have taken at least 2,000 jumpers, and Wall is 77th out of 78 in effective field goal percentage, and Westbrook is 78th out of 78. So like you're sending these 2 guys, it's just it doesn't change that much, but at least the Wizards get better.
Wow, man, that is damning in a lot of ways. Tim Kalishaw, is there any bright side to this? Where do you think this trade has its most impact?
Well, I mean, I think it's better for Washington than my colleagues are saying. And I don't know where it puts them in the East. I think it puts them into the playoffs for sure. I mean, Westbrook, Durant, and Scott Brooks did a lot of damage in Oklahoma City. They didn't win it, but they were very good. Westbrook and Beal and Scott Brooks, let's see what they can put around it and do. I just wonder about Houston. John Wall is about as good a three-point shooter as Westbrook, which means he's terrible. He's not quite as awful, but he's close. And he's a guy who needs the ball in his hands. So what does he do for a team where James Harden wants to dribble all night? It's a weird match for Houston.
Right. Can you address whether you think this means Harden staying or going, Tim, real quickly?
I think he's staying. I don't think there's – just because these other $40 million guys get traded, Houston would want a lot for Harden, and I don't think that's
Ramona, you're shaking your head no.
Oh, my first thought when they traded Westbrook was, oh, Harden's next. Because, I mean, to me, they were never going to trade James Harden until they traded Russell Westbrook.
Right.
And right now, all Harden has to do is work with the team, rebuild this relationship just enough, play just well enough to where everybody comes with their best offer. And I think that if they don't want to trade him under duress, he's got a bunch of years left on his contract. He doesn't really have a lot of leverage to force his way out of town. His only leverage is just to make himself, do the Jimmy Butler thing in Minnesota, right? Make himself disruptive. I don't think James is going to do that, but I think if James wants to get traded someplace, he needs to work with the team to rebuild his value. And I personally think that's what's going to happen.
And who is this everybody who makes an offer?
Right away,
Who is available then to make an offer for Harden?
I mean, look, Brooklyn is the name you've heard. I personally think Philly has a good shot at it. You know, there's a lot of teams in this league that would like to have James Harden. He's James Harden. He's a top 3 MVP candidate every single year. And I know people act like that's not a valuable player on your team because you'd have to build your team around him, but he's James Harden.
Bob, I know I cut you short before, and I apologize for that. Please come back and now answer to the James Harden, if you may.
I think that I don't know who wants to play with him really when you think about it. I'm sorry. He should be playing on a vaudeville act, a one-man show like Springsteen. That's it.
Oh, Springsteen does have a band around him, too. I mean, okay.
All right. Doesn't have an opening act.
Bob, when you brought up the idea that the Washington fans are going to be feeling this trade the most, I thought you were talking about John Wall, because what he's meant to fans from D.C., and that's just not being on the table when they won in Game 6 to force that Game 7 versus Boston 3 years ago, which was a big moment, or the Dougie from his career debut. It's also his home rent assist program and other things. But how much should a franchise take into consideration before making a trade that, you know, this is kind of a beloved guy who started his career here?
I don't know really what the depth of fandom in that town is after 40 years of relentless mediocrity, which, by the way, will not be altered by this trade one iota. So I'm serious.
Wow.
They're not going to. I don't know how you can tell me how much they love him. There might be like the old days in New York when they said there were 17,000 hockey fans. They all went to the games. I'm not that convinced that D.C. is that crazy about.
Okay, Ramona, do you want to answer that question? If you
Yeah, and that was some harsh Boston,
really was.
like looking down their nose at Washington. Woo! Like John meant a lot to that team and that city. I think the city embraced him and he embraced them off the court as well. He did a lot in the community, and I think they'll really miss him. But you know, he wanted out. So it doesn't hurt as much when you're the one.
But why did he want out? Did he want out because the team started floating the trade rumors, or the team started saying this is Beal's
No,
team?
I think it's him and Beal, and I think they've never really decided. You know, both of them want to be the guy, and John's been gone for 2 years. So in those 2 years, Bradley Beal's become the guy.
Well, there was
And we
jokes
feel
about
like-
the salary, of course, because he got such a super max and then didn't play, and that's understandable. There was also the Dougie, which was 34 seconds long in his debut. That's understandable. That's fun and funny, and clearly that's self-focused. But to call him a me-first guy, which happened afterwards, that's kind of unfair. And part of why we know that is because this is incontrovertible proof that John Wall is not a me-first guy here. This is his rent assist program. I was just talking about this. Raised over $500,000 for Ward 8. One of the great acts of anybody, athlete or otherwise, during this pandemic and rent crisis in America. That doesn't go away. That doesn't get traded. No. That's the best assist of a career. Here's our break. Bye.
To be bluntly honest, man, I'm really disappointed in our performance tonight. We did enough to win, but that's all. It was really junior varsity. We couldn't run the ball effectively when we needed to. We dropped too many significant passes, very catchable. Our kickoff coverage unit wasn't good enough. We turned the damn ball over.
You had some red zone failures and a number of drop passes. What do you attribute that to? Anything in particular?
Us sucking.
Tell us how you really feel. So that was Mike Tomlin. Worst 11-0 was trending for a while after the game as well. That's what other people thought. Tim Calishow, what did you think of the Steelers' 11th win yesterday afternoon?
Well, here's why it's worst 11-0 to Mike Tomlin, because the Chiefs are 10-1. And there's only one bye this year, and that is a big deal to try to hang on to that. And they have risked, 3 weeks ago, they played the same game against Dallas behind a bad Cowboys team all day, won by 5 points. Yesterday, they're playing all kinds of quarterbacks for the Ravens, and they had trouble putting the game
Would
away.
you give any pass because of the way this game came about with the postponement on postponement, delay, lack of practice, et cetera, et cetera?
That has to have an effect, even though it has more of an effect on Baltimore with their players out. It's got to have an impact when teams aren't practicing at normal.
Sarah, do you see the Steelers at 11-0 as the worst 11-0 and all the sucking that Tomlin was talking about yesterday? What do you think of it?
I just think the 11-0 doesn't matter unless you're good enough to actually win it all. And he's looking at his team and saying, we can't beat the Chiefs. He's looking at Ben Roethlisberger. He's saying he's 28th in yards per attempt, 31st in yards per completion. They have flaws that were exposed. Meanwhile, if you're the Ravens, things are bad enough, and this is equivalent of you got to run wind sprints after they beat you, right? You're watching the team that just whooped your butt getting punished for not beating you well enough.
Well, there wasn't a lot of butt
I don't
whipping.
blame
I mean,
him.
this was a game that was a lot closer than everybody thought. There were two very debatable referee calls that maybe factored into that. Bob Ryan, can I ask you first on Tomlin calling out his team?
I think he overrated his team. It was more like Pop Warner. Actually. The drops were what got me. Yeah. The drops. At least 5 just awful drops that affected them. No, they couldn't move the ball in the red zone, as we know. They win, fortunately, one fortunate pick 6 that was a bad throw by Griffith. I mean, they have nothing to look back on. They had nothing to hang their hat on in that game yesterday.
Okay, but there are times when I hear a win is a win from people on this panel. Ramona, was last night a win, or was it a loss for an 11-0 team?
I mean, I think it counts as a win in that, Tim's right, that what matters is finishing ahead of the Chiefs here. But it's kind of a loss. I mean, they lost one of their top defensive players to an ACL injury. They didn't look great. And I think what Tomlin's saying is essentially this year is really all about being able to survive and get through these kinds of games because there's no predictability to this year.
Well, they got through it, and it seems like it's still not good enough for Tomlin. That's fine. Yeah. I mean, the man's got a ring. He knows what a good team looks like. There was those 2 calls. Nobody's jumping on that delay of game penalty. How did the refs not call that? And the first down, when you still have – how did that happen, too? 2 plays here, and Baltimore's in this game, Bob.
Well, the delay of game was clear. There's a bungled refereeing. That should have been called. As far as the spotting the ball goes, though, that's just Exhibit A in football, the most capricious thing in all American sport. Right. Spotting the football. I don't fault anybody for botching that one. There's no botch. It's a guess. It's always a guess.
One of my favorite rants of all time. Let's get the best people from MIT right now, Bob, and get a microchip in the ball. Every time you say it, every time it happens, I think of you.
Saying that
there was one in Cleveland this week that was also terrible. We'll move on. Paul George. On the All the Smoke podcast, Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, quote, we never worked on adjustments. We never worked on what to do differently. We just literally having the same bleep happen over and over again. So he said that about the collapse. And then he also questioned how Doc Rivers was playing him on his role on the court. Talking about how he needs flow and more pick and rolls and mixes. Bob, how do you hear Paul George there?
Well, I don't like hearing it because I love Doc Rivers, but I don't think it was the rantings of a fool. It sounded like a very measured, legitimate basketball analysis. And if you didn't know who was giving it, you wouldn't say it was Paul George, maybe. But I'd like to hear from Doc now.
Ramona, is Paul George allowed to talk after this postseason, the way it ended for him and his team?
Yeah, that's my point. Is the last endearing image that we have of you is hitting the side of the backboard. Maybe keep that tight. maybe it's not the right time to talk. Like, wait until you have some great games and you're rolling and you've proven yourself again. But look, people tend to open up on that All the Smoke podcast. I think they just do something to loosen people.
Oh yeah, is that
what they say?
All I know is in the first round of the playoffs, the second best thing the Mavs had going for them after Luka was Paul George's shooting. It was keeping them alive in a couple of the games. And do you really think all year, if this was true, he would never have brought it up? I think he would have brought it up.
Zara, you need about a 13-point answer here.
Yeah, well, I think what Ramona's saying is everybody's really blunt, and they just kind of
okay, all right. Yeah, that's going to get you points for your scoring average. Not enough to advance. That's it for Timmy. That's it for Spade. Shelburne. Right, Bob, you have no idea what we're talking about here. Okay, that's fine. Showdown in 4 minutes. Shelburne, Bob Ryan, good luck in Showdown. Should the Big Ten adjust to help Ohio State out? Not a question you'd think would be brought up by Wisconsin and Barry Alvarez, but here we are. 4 games played for the Buckeyes, 2 canceled. This week, Michigan State's still on. Next week, Michigan in jeopardy due to Michigan positives. Ramona, should the Big Ten adjust the schedule to help Ohio State out?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they're not just helping Ohio State out. If they're the best team and they have a chance to go play for a national title, that gives money back to the rest of the conference. So you want your best team there.
Yes, 1,000 times yes, because if you took a secret ballot, locked Ryan Day out of the room, took a secret ballot of all the other coaches, it would be unanimous. The best team in the league is Ohio State. Everybody knows it.
Okay. Well, if everybody knows it, everyone knows. You're splitting the point. We'll move on. Did you guys see the line for Alabama LSU? By the way, speaking of college this week, defending champs, 29.5-point underdog. Does that tell you more about LSU or more about Alabama, Bob?
Alabama is always Alabama, but I had a history teacher who used to talk about crumbling empires. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. LSU has fallen. This story's about their demise.
Look, yes, LSU has fallen off, but nothing about this year necessarily makes me build into a larger narrative. To me, it's about Alabama every single year, no matter what, being there and being favored.
Look at Ramona right now. She thinks she still has a chance to win this. You didn't know what you said. The word came out of your mouth. You didn't even hear it. A banned word in showdown. Oh, tough loss for Shelburne. Bob Ryan, the beneficiary. 30 seconds of face time.
The 1956 Olympic marathon came down to a battle between UCLA friends and teammates C.K. Yang and Rayford Johnson. The 1,500 meters, the last event, was Yang's best event. He needed to win by 10 seconds to get the gold. Johnson ran a personal best, got there within 1.2 seconds, won that gold. Johnson was an athlete beyond measure. He was a starter for John Wooden. He was an NFL draft pick. He was an exemplary person who led a great life, including being on the ground floor of the Special Olympics. He was there when Bobby Kennedy was shot, and he helped wrestle him down to the ground along with George Plimpton and Rosie Greer. He died yesterday at age 86, a truly great American life.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.